What's going on, everyone? It is Sheena, aka Sheenapreneur, your favorite veteran. I wanted to talk today about subcontracting limitations or lack thereof when it comes to local contracting. This has come up a few times and I just want to do a really quick video. Now, most of us know that when it comes to subcontracting, or if you want to use that goofy term that I don't want to say, but like middleman, and you talk about the local or talk about the subcontracting restrictions or the restrictions of using someone else in your company to fulfill a contract. Usually that's going to be a subcontracting restriction. So with that, on the federal side, you may know that there is usually a restriction when it comes to the set-asides. So for those who don't know, set-asides are the what the federal government sets aside for smaller businesses. So small business itself is a set-aside, veteran-owned, woman-owned, AA, etc. So those are set-asides, and usually there are subcontracting limitations when it comes to federal contracting. And some people ask me, is there a limitation when it comes to local? So the answer is yes and no. Basically, for the most part, every single agency on the state and local. So state and local means the state is looking for services, the county is looking for services, the city is looking for services, a school system is looking for services. So that's considered state and local, or municipalities. So that's pretty much separate from federal contracting. Some of those agencies cross over, but for the purposes of this video, we're not talking about that. We're just talking about straight up state and local agencies. So many times a state and local agency puts out a solicitation. They are just looking for the service to be provided. Now, there are local certifications, such as like a city certification or a county certification. They have women-owned local certifications and stuff like that. But most of the certifications at the local level are going to be like small business certifications, meaning they want a local small business. They want a local small business to be certified in that city or that state or that county in order to provide services for that city or that state or that county. So those are basically the main certifications at the local level. There are women-owned, there are veteran-owned, etc., where they can you have to provide proof, and then they include it in your local small business certification. So I don't want to get you too confused, but basically the reason why I'm saying this is because there is a little bit of a validity when it comes to subcontracting, either limitations or mandatory subcontracting when it comes to local side. So we talked about federal side. Federal side, usually there is a subcontracting limitation where it's like 49%, or if it's construction, at least 20% has to be conducted by the prime contractor, because since construction is a little tricky, they don't make it as much of a percentage for subcontracting limitations that they do for other industries within the federal government. But for the local government, when it comes to subcontracting the work out, there may be an agency that is looking for someone to provide the work. They don't give a damn who you use. You can use your mom and them, your sister and them, your children, as long as the work gets done. And this is exclusively when we're talking about services. Well, there are some when it comes to products as well, but for services, a lot of times they just want the work done, and you just give them a price. You have to figure out, when you're submitting your proposal, submitting your bid, submitting your quote, you have to determine if the agency is looking for, of course, I'm always going to use an industry that I am super familiar with. Janitorial is one of those. Let's just say it's a 100,000 square foot building and it's at night. So that means it's after hours. And so that means that I have to get people in there cleaning it and they got to leave, right? So that's usually how it works when it comes to janitorial. I did a whole video on janitorial. I will leave the link in the description for you to check out. But basically, when it comes to janitorial, for example, I usually will hire a company to go into that facility and clean it however often it needs to be cleaned. The agency is not asking me what subcontractor you're going to use, because as far as I'm concerned, that company worked for me. They don't know. They just need to know who needs a badge, who needs access to get in. Sometimes it's background checks, but for the purposes of this video, we're not going to talk about all that. Just going to talk about whether or not how I'm using a subcontractor. So that person, that company will come in with however many people they think. I give them a specific price. If it's 100,000 square feet, let's just say I'm charging the agency, I don't know, $5,000 a month. I'm just literally throwing a number out there. And then I tell the company that I'm hiring that I'm going to pay them $4,000 a month. Let's just say, for example, and I'll pay an extra amount. I'll pay 4/5 of the contract if that means that I don't have to do anything but submit the invoice, oh yeah, I'll do that because I'm going to have more contracts. But anyways, so when it comes to the limitations, usually the agency is not going to ask who the subcontractor is. They may ask who is it, the foreman, who's the person in charge, who needs a badge sometimes, who needs a key. That's it. But usually they're not going to ask for the subcontracting company. Now, the reason why I brought up the certifications at the local level earlier is because really, when it comes to local certifications, larger companies that, or they're not local or they're not a diverse company, will usually need a diverse company or a local company to subcontract the work out to. So for example, let's just say it's a larger company, but not a large company. We're not talking about JLL, which is a large like facilities janitorial company, or Neighborly, which is like they have Molly Maids, which is a large company. Let's just say it's a larger company that makes $15 million a year, you know, which essentially if you're a new business, they probably make more than you, right? But they're larger than you, but they're not a large company, and they may not be local. They may be headquartered in the city of Lawrenceville, Georgia, but they, you know, I am a company that is headquartered in the city of Atlanta, so I have a local Atlanta certification, and that's not really how it works when it comes to city ones. But anyway, I'm just throwing it out there because it's different for every city, for every county, for every state. And so that company that's in Lawrenceville, Georgia is like, hey, I am going after the city of Atlanta contract, and I have to subcontract out at least 10% of this contract out to a local city of Atlanta based company. And boom, you're here. You can do the work. You already have a track record doing the things that we do. So we're going to use you as a subcontractor. So in that case, yes, my company needs to be named because this is for a specific agenda for that specific county or city. So this county or city or whatever, even for Atlanta, the Hartsfield-Jackson Airport, specifically, the work has to be subcontracted out. For any company that gets a contract at the airport, they have to subcontract out at least 25% to a minority certified company. So that's where it matters about whether you can use a sub for the work. But if you're a small company yourself and you're just, you know, you're getting started, or you're just getting to another state, or even if you're not just getting started and you're just going into local for the first time or whatever, and you need to subcontract out the work, usually the agency is not going to ask. Now, there is some proposal or some solicitations where it will show what subcontractor are you going to use. Typically, especially when we're trying to get these bids in last minute, I don't always put the company because I have such a great relationship with my subcontractors that they just wear my shirt. Now, that can get kind of muddy when you're working with people you don't know, and that's why I tell you all not to just go and work with companies you don't know. Sometimes you have to, and sometimes it ends up being great. More often than not, it ends up being just fine. But when you're working with a company that you don't know how volatile they are, they might try to sabotage you and take your contract from you. So when you're not naming the sub and you're just like, oh yeah, that's one of my guys on my team, then you might open yourself up for, you know, any type of issues with that subcontractor that you are using. Like, you're the prime, you're not doing any of the work, and you're hiring a subcontracting company that actually does the work. I do that all the time. There's another name that people have been floating on the internet, but I do that all the time, but it's still within the realm of my industry, facility management. So whether it's litter pickup, janitorial, landscaping, debris removal, painting, pressure washing, if it's any of those things, then I will still use, I go within those parameters when I'm hiring a subcontractor. So there is sort of kind of limitations when it comes to a company using a local small business, because really, if you're a minority business, if you're a veteran business, if you're a woman business, pretty much you don't have to abide by that specification when it comes to the local side subcontracting agenda. If they're saying you must subcontract out 25% of all contracts at the Hartsfield-Jackson Airport, and you're already a minority owned company, then technically you don't have to subcontract it out to a minority company. I mean, because you're the minority company. It's just the agenda is to make sure that minority companies and, women-owned companies are getting a fair shot at these contracts. So at the local level, it's kind of like a yes and no. I hope I answered your question when it comes to that. So the bottom line is maybe, and it depends, right? not really, is not really checked at the local level. Most of our contracts for my company, Foresight Industries, is local. And really, we don't really need to list a subcontractor. I have an understanding with my subcontractors that we're the prime and you guys are the sub, but you're going to be waving the Foresight Industries flag, so to speak. You're going to be representing Foresight. That's who, the shirts you're going to wear and all these kind of things. So it usually just works out, but it might be easier for you to list out the subcontractor just to make sure that everything is, dress right dress, or it's proper. So it's really up to you, and if you have time, because sometimes the subcontractor has to fill out documentation. So if you're trying to get a bid done last minute, you may not have time for the subcontractor to fill in all their information, so you just say, I'm not using one. But in reality, you are using one, just as long as they can do the work, right? And also, I've seen a couple of times where an agency, they require you to use the minority subcontract again. And most of the time, if you're a minority owned company, again, you don't have to use, this is local, depends on the agency. You won't have to use a minority company if you are a minority company yourself. But I've heard in some states where even if you're a minority owned company, you have to use a minority owned sub, period. No matter what, you can't do any internal work. Like, you can't just hire within, and just like Foresight Industries is doing the whole contract, you have to hire a subcontractor, period. No matter what, no matter whether you black, white, alien, Martian, you have to hire a minority owned company. And I've only seen that a few times. The airport is one of those. And then in Georgia, DeKalb County is another agency that requires you to have a sub. Not necessarily like if you're a minority, then you have to have a minority sub, but they require you to have minority subs if the company that is going after the opportunity is not a minority. So I hope I broke that down. I feel like I was going in circles a little bit, but I hope I explained that local contracting, there is a little bit of a sub qualification or requirement, but not nearly as much as the federal when it comes to the federal set aside contract. So of course, right now, we have our GovCon Moneymakers group where we have over 1,000 people in there now. We're sharing information and helping each other and sharing stories and sharing wins. And of course, my course, GovCon Now, with the 2.0 loading, okay? So make sure you check that out, because I teach about not just federal contracting. I teach about federal contracting, local contracting, corporate contracting. There's nobody that I know, unless you can tell me in the comments who is teaching about federal contracting, local contracting, and corporate contracting all at once in one course for an 8-hour course. It ain't no 1 hour, 2 hours that I've been hearing about. And you get the mentorship with me exclusively, not someone on my team, but you get the mentorship with me because I done seen it all. Okay, like Shorty Low done it all. So you get the mentorship with me, learning about federal, local, and corporate contracting, and then also have a section for my veterans. So I hope to see you guys in the course. I hope to see you guys going after more contracts. So until next time, it's your favorite veteran.